All right, and we're live, ladies and germs. A special noon edition of Burnt Rubber here on Thursday, February the 20th, 2025. Big news coming out of Daytona this week. Some penalties being handed down, and they're pretty big ones. So let's go ahead and get into things with today's edition of Burnt Rubber. This video is brought to you by Reaper Apparel Company. Stay tuned until after the video to learn how you can save 10% off of your order. Hey, what's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of Burnt Rubber. And we got some stuff to talk about today. Mainly from the Daytona 500, some IndyCar stuff. But as the name of the episode indicates, some big penalties coming out of Daytona. So let's go ahead and get into it. So, first topic of the day is the number 19 team penalized for a spoiler infraction. Now, what kind of spoiler infraction? Well, let's get into it because on X, Bozy Tatarevic basically went through everything. But on the side note, there's a couple other teams and drivers that got penalized. Todd Gilliland in the FRM number 34 team and Cody Ware in the RWR number 51 team were docked 10 points for ballast not in the proper ballast containers for pre-qualifying tech. So those are the other penalties. But obviously the big penalty of the day is Chase Briscoe and the number 19 team for Joe Gibbs Racing. So, the number 19 has been docked 100 driver and owner points, 10 playoff points, fined $100,000, and crew chief James Small has been suspended for 4 weeks for illegally modifying their spoiler at Daytona. Which means that as of right now, Chase Briscoe has minus 67 points. And he will have negative 10 playoff points. And someone pointed this out, but this is the second year in a row that the pole sitter of the Daytona 500 had questionable legality. So what exactly happened that caused the 19 team to have a illegal modification of a single source supplied part? Well, Bozy Tatarevic basically went into great detail, so we're going to cover that. So it's basically a thread of shit. So he says the number 19 of Chase Briscoe was hit with a large penalty for modification of a single source supplied part under the following sections of the rulebook: sections 14.1.CNDNS, overall assembled vehicle rules, section 14.5.8.A, spoiler. So, Cup Series cars are required to run a 7-inch by 60-inch spoiler face on a tall spoiler base for super speedway races, which is shown on the bottom half of this illustration. NASCAR runs such a large spoiler base in order to slow the cars down, and teams obviously want to find ways to make speed, so getting air away from the spoiler is a priority whenever possible, but NASCAR tries to make sure that the spoilers cannot flex through multiple methods, and here's another diagram of that. NASCAR requires the spoiler angle to be at a minimum of 69.9 degrees at super speedways and deflect a maximum of 1.5 degrees at all locations when tested using NASCAR's spoiler deflection device. The deflection device is a weight that attaches to the spoiler for checks during tech inspection. There is also a template that is placed over the spoiler in order to make sure that the spoiler is positioned properly. NASCAR goes to a lot of effort to make sure that the spoiler does not exceed that angle, because if a spoiler can be laid back, a car will go faster because less drag. The number 19 passed all those checks during technical inspection but failed when it was brought back to NASCAR R&D for a teardown after the race. Based on my understanding, NASCAR found modifications in the area where the spoiler base bolts to the trunk lid. This area of the spoiler base has holes in it that line up with threaded inserts on the underside of the deck lid, and these purple and yellow bolts go through those holes to attach the spoiler to the deck lid. You can see those bolts going through the spoiler base and into the bottom of the deck lid from this photo of a race-used deck lid that I was able to find, which is that right there. There are a total of 19 of these mounting bolts, and 2 also double as tether bolts, as you can see in this picture. The holes in the spoiler base are drilled specifically for the bolt sizes used, and if they were to become elongated, a spoiler could potentially be moved relative to the deck lid, which could result in less air over the spoiler and an improvement in speed. NASCAR likely spotted elongated holes there and came to the conclusion that the parts were modified, which is why they would issue the penalty, since the spoiler base is spec part produced by Roush Advanced Composites that teams are not allowed to modify. But there's also potential for these holes to become elongated due to wear and tear because of how the bolt holes are arranged and due to how tightly everything fits back there where the spoiler meets the tail, which is likely why JGR will want to appeal. We'll get to that in a minute. The key for JGR in an appeal will likely be the fact that due to manufacturing tolerances, there were spoiler bases in the past that required sanding of the area, which interfaces with the tail because things were so tight that the deck lid could not be closed in certain cases. In addition to these tight tolerances, the bolts are arranged in such a manner that all of them have to be threaded loosely in order to be able to bolt them all in because of the curved shape of the spoiler base, and tightening them can often put wear on the holes. These mounting bolts can be so tight to remove and install that many teams will leave spoilers mounted onto the deck lids and just remove the mounting bolts in the back of the deck lid when tearing cars down. It's hard to judge whether parts were intentionally modified or whether there was wear and tear just from the penalty report, so hopefully we'll be able to see the parts that were inspected at the R&D Center in order to make a better assessment of what actually happened. And he tracked down an older bulletin which shows an example of some of the modifications that were allowed to spoiler bases in order to make all the parts fit together properly. There are multiple corrective actions that were allowed on that bulletin, including sanding of the back of the spoiler base in order to prevent fitment issues. This document also gives us the best view yet of what a spoiler base looks like, along with the holes on the bottom that are likely in question when it comes to this penalty, which is that right there. That document also provides a closer view of how the spoiler base interfaces with the deck lid, which is this picture right here. So yeah, it's quite the read, to say the least. And like I said, it's a big penalty. 100 points, 10 playoff points, and crew chief James Small suspended for 4 races. And the team was also fined $100,000. However, JGR will appeal the penalty to the 19 team. Now, JGR says the issue in question was caused in the assembly process when bolts used to attach the spoiler base to the deck lid caused the pre-drilled holes to wear due to the supplied part interferences. So, yeah, I would say the appeal will probably come either this weekend or sometime next week, because today is actually Parker Kligerman's appeal for his disqualification from the Daytona truck race win. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, pretty big penalty to say the least, and a rough start to Chase Briscoe's tenure at Joe Gibbs Racing. Already 67 points in the hole, so he better hope that JGR wins the appeal. So we'll have to wait and see what happens on that. Yeah, I saw that right before SRU started last night, and I was just like, holy shit, that's a pretty big penalty. And like I said, Todd Gilliland and Cody Ware were docked 10 points for ballast not in the proper ballast container. So a very, very controversial week coming out of the Daytona 500 and going into the Daytona 500. So, on that front, not really a good start for NASCAR to 2025. Although, when you look at the viewership ratings, that seems to be a little different, but we'll get to that in a minute. But next topic at hand. We've got some IndyCar news. IndyCar is making some rules and race length adjustments for 2025. So, this is from IndyStar.com. Give it a second, it's loading. So, IndyCar announces 2025 rules changes. So, first off, IndyCar will be adding at least 5 laps to 6 races in 2025 in order to help vary strategies and eliminate processional fuel save races. And let me go back to X real quick. So they're adding laps to certain numbers of races. 6 races to help boost on-track excitement. And those 6 races are Long Beach, has been increased to 90 laps, which is 5 additional laps. Mid-Ohio, so it's now a 90-lap race. That's a 10-lap increase from the previous year. Iowa, which is a double-header, they've added 25 laps to those races, so it's 275 laps, meaning that the IndyCar Series is going to be doing 550 laps at Iowa this year. So that'll be interesting. Toronto is going to be a 90-lap race, so plus 5 laps to that race. And then the season finale at Nashville is going to be a 225-lap race, an increase of 19 laps from the previous year. In addition to that, though, and why did it reset? Why did my thingamajig reset? There we go. But in addition to that, some of these changes will go into effect as soon as the season opening weekend on the streets of St. Pete, where practice begins February the 28th, so 8 days from now. So, like I said, 6 races have their race lengths lengthened. So, IndyCar responds to oval start and restart controversies following multiple messy and sometimes waved off restarts on ovals in recent years, including notable ones that sparked multi-car pileups in 2024. IndyCar has instituted a mandatory pair-up location for cars to line up through the field still with 1 lap to go before the green flag. Doing so, in theory, should help the middle and rear of the pack from getting strung out and then speeding to try and catch up, creating the potential for cars to run into the back of each other, with some cars slowed but getting ready to accelerate and others accelerating but preparing to slow. Additionally, on ovals, IndyCar has worked to extend the beginning of restart zones to give the lead car more discretion on where they choose to accelerate. Yeah, there were several races last year that had pretty stupid pileups and crashes on restarts, so hopefully this will help eliminate that. But in addition, IndyCar has changed road and street practice formats and tire allotments. So IndyCar will expand its split practice format to nearly every road or street course minus Road America for 2025 for the first practice of the weekend on Friday afternoon. The format should allow for more purposeful running during that pair of 10-minute segments that will feature half of the field, allowing for fewer cars on track so teams and drivers more easily find windows to run by themselves. Those practices will begin with 45-minute full field segments, followed by 2 10-minute ones where the field will be split by their odd or even pit box numbers. Also at select road and street courses, all by the Thermal Club and the IMS Road Course. I'm pretty sure it's all but that's another typo that I'm finding in here. IndyCar will supply teams with 1 more set of alternate tires for the weekend, up to 5 from 4, while giving them one less set of primaries from the weekend, down to 5 from 6. So that's another adjustment they made. And IndyCar drivers will be allowed to use hybrid to restart car on the pit lane. After the mid-season launch of the new hybrid technology last summer at Mid-Ohio, drivers were barred from using the system's unique feature of being able to start or restart the car in case of a stall while on pit lane. At the time, with the system so new, IndyCar viewed such a use as potentially dangerous in case crew members might be scrambling to try and restart the car outside the cockpit, only for the driver to spark it themselves and attempt to take off suddenly. With teams and drivers more accustomed to the technological advancement, IndyCar will now allow drivers to start and restart the car from inside the cockpit, a move that up until now has required starters to be plugged into the rear of the car by a crew member. In addition, IndyCar drivers to be alerted to local yellows with a new cockpit notification. In hopes of avoiding the massive multi-car pileup that sent one car airborne during last summer's Toronto race, IndyCar has tinkered with teams' in-cockpit alert systems so that drivers will be notified of a local yellow flag by a notification on their steering wheel dashboards. Without those notifications that will now be guaranteed to be within a driver's sight lines, IndyCar only used corner workers waving flags and light panels hanging from the fencing, both of which, depending on location, may not be easily seen by drivers in situations that might include blind corners and where fractions of a second of additional reaction time can make all the difference. So I think that's a good change too. Late in the race at Toronto, Pato O'Ward spun entering Turn 1, a move that would collect nearly a half dozen cars, including Santino Ferrucci, whose number 14 Chevy launched into the air, rode the concrete barriers and fencing sideways, and came to a stop on the pavement upside down. Yeah, I saw that crash, and it was pretty freaking crazy. In the aftermath of the crash, the series received stern criticism from teams and drivers alike that the lack of visibility to that part of a track for spotters and the length of time its safety alert systems took to properly alert drivers of an incident. So hopefully all these changes will be positive. Obviously, they want to make the races a bit more exciting and not have less fuel mileage races. And also from a safety perspective, they've made several changes, which I think will be pretty good. So, but the new season is not that far away, just a couple weeks away. So, be interesting to see how all these changes turn out. And then to round out today's edition of Burnt Rubber, Daytona TV ratings are in. Didn't really see the ones for the Truck Series, but for the Xfinity Series race at Daytona, the CW says it drew 1.8 million viewers for Saturday's NASCAR Xfinity United Rentals 300 per Nielsen. Fast Nationals, the best for a race in that series since Spring Talladega 2022 and the most watched Daytona season opener since 2020. The Daytona 500, on the other hand, had an average on Fox of 6.761 million people, which was up from 5.964 million people in 2023 on a Monday. Here's the thing, though. From 2:06 to 2:15 p.m., which was around the time that the rain hit, 7.959 million people were watching. So nearly 8 million people were watching the Daytona 500 around that time. Imagine if we didn't have the rain delay. But that's still pretty good numbers for the Daytona 500, which the Daytona 500, honestly, the racing was pretty good. But, I mean, honestly, it's starting to feel like it. I hate to say it, but as prestigious as the Daytona 500 is, it's honestly feeling less and less merit-based and more based on luck. Because let's be completely honest here, William Byron, I mean, you want to talk about a lucky motherfucker. Coming to the white flag, he was ninth. And he managed to get through the craziness of that last lap wreck, which happened yet again, and came out smelling of roses and winning his second consecutive Daytona 500. Only the fifth driver to do so. He only led 9 laps the entire race this year. Pretty sure he led more last year. This time around, he definitely had a golden horseshoe up his ass. Because honestly, he was not really much of a factor the entire day. Until the end, but that's when it usually counts. But that's going to do it for this edition of Burnt Rubber. Not a whole lot to speak on this time around, but obviously the number 19 penalty was the big topic of this episode, and I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit because it is a big penalty. And obviously JGR is going to appeal it for obvious reasons, and PackerMan's appeal is set to go today as well, so there's that going on. But that's going to do it for this edition of Burnt Rubber. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. See you later. Hey, what's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan letting you know that tonight's video was sponsored by Reaper Apparel Company. By clicking on the affiliate link down below in the description box, you'll be able to browse through many of their different wares, such as hats, t-shirts, hoodies, and other cool items. When you place an order and you go to checkout, be sure to type in the code PackerMan and you'll be able to save 10% off of your order. Reaper Apparel Company. Apparel to die for. Hey, ladies and germs, just want to say thank you for watching tonight's video. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And also check out my other channels, Isaac the Survivalist and Our Honor Defend Archives, if you're a Buckeye fan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.